Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we have a guest who is a perfect personification of the very mission of our company. Nothing more important to the success of your startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. Remember? Yash Nelapati, who was the very first engineer at Pinterest. What a great conversation. What a great guy. What a nice way to look at the world and a nice way to, capture how this, really amazing Pinterest journey ended up coming about and working out. I mean, Yash is a design engineer, essentially. That's kind of how the world right now talks about what Yash does. And it just so happens that the way he approached development resonated perfectly with Ben and with what Pinterest was building.
Yeah.
And I like that Yash made things simple. Like the way he talked about why he joined Pinterest and what was kind of compelling about them was just really simple. He's just like, I like the product. I got along well with the people.
Yeah.
It felt like it was something that I would enjoy doing. And that was really that simple. And it was interesting that after all was said and done and Pinterest turned into like this whole entire thing, he was kind of just like, most people overcomplicate things. Like if you like the product, if you like the people, just kind of work on it and it'll probably like be great. Like it was just such a nice, refreshing way to look at the world and so humble. I mean, engineer number one at Pinterest, come on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, he talked about how just, again, like make the decision simple. Like, do you like the product? Yes. Do you like the team? Yes. Like you don't have to worry about much beyond that. It'll be what it is. And I truly, I think probably some of the reasons why Pinterest did take off the way it did is because you're not just trying to make it rich. You're not trying to get rich off of this. You're doing something that you're truly passionate about. You will spend the amount of time and effort to be a product that other people care about and love too. And you'll enjoy doing so because you're not caught up thinking about money. Like you're working on something you love. Like that's great.
Yeah.
It all works out in the end. It sounds like it did.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
It sounds like it didn't. It really does.
Yeah. And he was working in an apartment. I just remember he said that. He was like, it's kind of a weird environment. That part.
Yeah, we did spend a lot of time on that. We're like, no, seriously, what was it like working in an apartment?
He even corrected you at one point. He was like, well, it wasn't a bedroom. It was an apartment. I want to be clear.
That was awkward.
I just remembered that happened. Sorry.
Yash was there from the very beginning, coding in Ben Silberman's apartment, battling bugs, and celebrating milestones with bagels and breadsticks. Yash's journey is a masterclass in risk-taking, perseverance, and building something incredible from scratch. We'll hear how he navigated the chaotic early days, scaled the platform to millions of users, and witnessed firsthand the impact of those first few engineering hires. So get ready for some amazing stories and insights from the person who literally built the foundation of Pinterest. Yash, welcome to the First 10 podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you, Boris.
Excited for you to be here. Excited to hear some stories and sharing some stories. We spent some time at Pinterest in some of the early days, so it'll be fun to kind of reminisce and kind of hear more about how it all started.
Happy to do so. Yeah.
So before we jump into some of the fun stuff, just a little bit about you, Yash. So what's something that most people don't know about you?
I don't know. I always wanted to get into the movies. So although I took my path to master's in software engineering, I pursued a smaller career in animation and visual effects. So I was interested in script writing and just getting into production and post-production. So I was at a fork right after my master's to either just scrap everything and take up a career. I got a internship in Glendale, Disney. So I had a moment where I'm like, okay, I can either take this or this. And somehow I just chose to be a software engineer and take a little bit safer path.
That's interesting. So tell me, like, what's your absolute most favorite piece of cinema that you've ever seen?
Oh, I mean, that's hard to choose. Like, there's lots of movies that inspired me.
Yeah.
I don't know, the classics like Shawshank Redemption, just like recent times, David Fincher movies really like touch me. I read the script, like I watch the movie scene to scene, pause it, understand the lighting, how they're like, like taking the user or the movie viewer, like, into the story and all. Like, so I just do it like in my free time. I read the script, see how they're visualizing it.
Yeah.
That aspect always fascinated me and wanted me to pursue a career, but again, like it's a hard one. So
yeah, I can see how there's some overlap with that in engineering. It's very detail oriented. My husband actually has similar background. He's a web developer, but he also had like he did his undergrad in film and music. There's a lot of symmetry between the two, I think.
Yeah, my parents forced me into software, so I had no intention of becoming this, but my dad really pushed me into this. And I was like, I got to do this, at least for him. So, yeah.
Understood.
One more warm up question, and then we'll jump into the early days. So, what was the last book that you read, or maybe on the notes of scripts? What was the last script that you read?
Been a while. I read the Joker script and saw the Joker movie, which was a pretty fascinating, script to visualization. Not all scripts are available, but I think there's a site that, have it for download. So I think that was a very interesting experience. I mean, I don't know who the director is, but I could tell like every director has a visual storytelling style. So that was the last one I did. But I usually do David Fincher a lot more in detail. Like I really like his work. Been following him for the last 15 years. So
he's made some incredible films.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it. So tell us about your journey from failing to build a front end for a stealth product at Symantec to right before the Pinterest day. So like paint us a picture. What was going on in your life at that moment, right before Pinterest came into your world?
I did my undergrad in India. I came here in 2007, Jan, picked up my master's software engineering. Very soon I realized like I didn't have the skill set to be even an average master student. So I like understood that, look, I need to focus. Like these 2 years are very crucial. So I didn't take any internships or anything because most of those internships were very focused on testing. And like once you pick that up, like that's going to be your career stream within no time because that's all your experience is. So I took time and like really honed into my basics. I started like doing a lot more projects on the side. Open source was super helpful. Google Code was big in 2007 and 8. There was tons of code. So I was just cloning the repos, reading, trying to compile, get a sense of all sorts of errors. So spent a ton of time tinkering servers and learning the code by myself. End of 2008, when I graduated, like, the market was horrendous. Like the housing industry collapsed. There was no way I could look for a job. I made mistake by not taking in any internships. So I didn't have any experience to show. Prior to my job interviews, all I had was on-campus jobs, mostly filming a lot of videos by like professors and like editing them in Final Cut and delivering. So it was a pretty rough time. I found a job listing in Craigslist and I go for an interview and I'm like blown out, like, oh, this is Symantec. This is a huge company. So I go in, the manager was like pretty impressed. They were building a stealth product in the health space, which Symantec did not have a whole lot of experience. So they were building a brand new team. So I started in the team trying to build some front end, but within like a month or two, they were really amazing engineers, almost like CTOs of startups joining the team. I was super excited to learn, but pretty soon, like, I wasn't like a right fit. I knew it. I had to work super hard, but still like, I can tell like I wasn't the code or the product or the entire culture wasn't like for me. So I knew that I had a lot to learn, but I immediately got like, let go, like, hey, it's not really working out. It's almost like a moment that I was like, oh man, this was the opportunity I thought. And then again, I went into the slump, not a lot of jobs in 2008, ending in 9. So I was like, again, doing a lot of open source, Google Code. And like, I made few friends who like used to contract me. So they used to pay me a little bit. So I used to survive. And like end of 2009, like I joined a smaller company called Design Reactor, basically, giving life to the design team. just building a lot of front end testing and stuff. And that's when I was going to a lot of meetups, and that's where I met Ben and Paul from Pinterest. It was a particular meetup in Palo Alto where FriendFeed was acquired by Facebook, and then I just went, and for some stroke of luck, like I was asking a lot of questions in the meetup, which I never do. I'm always like very silent. But for some reason, like I've done a lot of homework on that code. As I said, I downloaded the repo, like compiled it, tons of errors. I fixed one by one, got in, and then I compiled. I got a good sense. So I was asking very deep questions, and somehow Ben and Paul noticed me, and they pursued me to join the company.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It sounds like, I mean, I'm curious, like because in between, like, you know, having left your role with Symantec and then finding Pinterest, it seems like you had a lot of these like sort of freelancing gigs where you're on your own, you're developing things, you're kind of figuring things out. Do you think that experience ultimately probably made you a stronger engineer than had you stayed at Symantec?
100%.
Yeah.
I think Symantec would have taught me a culture of working in a team and understanding my role and like what I need to do. But when you're a freelancer and you're just like, hey, build this entire greeting card website. That was one of the projects I worked on. I had to take a role where like made a ton of architectural decisions, like how to host. I never played with a lot of servers. So I had to do everything. So I had to get decent at everything, then like really be good at something.
Yeah.
And I think that lesson played a huge role in my life, which is like, there's a certain kind of attributes an engineer needs to be the first-end engineer. You got to be not good, but decent at a lot of disciplines than just be an expert in one.
Yeah.
And time and again, that lesson always like, you know, surfaced and be like, you got to make a decision. Do you want to work on your weakness, or do you just want to make your strength even stronger? And I always pursued the latter. So it definitely helped me. And I also was particularly looking at opportunities which would give me a role where like, there's no boundaries. I got to make decisions, and I got to pay attention to what problems are coming. And I knew that startups were the perfect playground to pursue that.
Interesting. So coming to Pinterest, right? So you joined as their first engineer, but I know you've, talked about publicly not being either super keen to join them or being a little, concerned about, Pinterest at that stage. Maybe tell us the story. So tell us what was concerning you, what was on your mind, how are you kind of viewing Pinterest from when you met them?
Yeah, I met Ben and Paul in Palo Alto. They showed me, they explained the vision. They were basically trying this idea of, hey, we all love our magazine cutouts, and I curate a ton of them. I want to do this digitally. That was the vision, when I first heard it. And I'm like, it's kind of cool. Like I used Delicious, Magnolia, and a bunch of other bookmarking sites back in the day. So it's hard. When you hear an idea, it's hard to see what is the execution and the end product like. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to take a bet. I knew that like the vision is pretty solid, but is that the right problem or the right strategy into that grand vision? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows the answer. You got to take a leap of faith and go build it.
Yeah.
So I liked the people, but I wasn't like super sold on the idea. I was very honest. Like I liked the opportunity, but I don't know. I don't know is what I basically told. But I think they had a ton of conviction, because I think Ben personally tried this idea like 6 times or in 6 different facets.
Was that right?
Yeah. And like when he met me, like there was this app called Tote. I think it's called hellotote.com. So he basically was building Pinterest, but in a certain way where the brands were pinning and users were just giving a lot of signal like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, I would like to see this, I would like to buy this. So those were the kind of signals. But again, it's a chicken and egg problem. There was no content, so therefore no users. Since there were no users, the brands weren't onboarding. So we had to somehow kickstart it in a way that there is critical mass amount of content so that the brands can jump in and make it interesting. And therefore they had to invert the idea of, Pinterest for people to curate and then build the value on top of that content.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm always curious about this is like when you're, when we talk to engineers and they're evaluating all the different opportunities that are out there, especially like early stage stuff, you don't have a concept of it yet. It's still like yet to be seen. I'm curious, like, when you were kind of thinking through this decision, I'm sure you have a support system. You're young, you're out there. It's like one of your first moves in your career. Like, was your family, did they have concerns about you doing this? Like, what did your support system think about all this?
I didn't have a whole lot of support system. I'm an only kid. My mom's only kid. So it's a pretty small family. And I don't think my parents were really involved in that decision.
Yeah.
And I mean, Asian parents being Asian, like, are you going to work in Microsoft? Are you going to work in Google?
Yeah.
Facebook? And I'm just like, well, I'm working out of an apartment where someone lives in. It's fun times, but like, it was pretty much a leap of faith on my end.
Yeah.
And also the market wasn't great.
Yeah.
So risk was something that you had to live with. And especially navigating all the immigration stuff is super tricky, and there's like a clock ticking. So you got to take those risks. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like, do I like these people?
Mm-hmm.
Are these the kind of people that I can like sit in an office and work with?
Yeah. And
I think if the answer is yes, I think you should do it.
Yeah.
And like get a feel for it.
That's awesome.
Tell us more about that initial conversation or series of conversations that you had with Ben. What was it that he was sharing that you either found that you found compelling, and what do you think he saw in you?
I think one thing I remember from his conversation is like, I think you can go hire an engineer, but hiring an engineer with an eye for design is something that's not easy, and like very few people like to go do that. And I think that still stays true even like almost a decade later. Like, you can find engineers who are very hardcore in the engineering world and like optimizing the hell out of it, but a lot of engineers do not like writing front end. Like, people who write front end do not want to go very deep into computer science and like optimizing for concurrencies and all. So I feel like there's an 80-20 rule where a good engineer spends 80% of their time optimizing code, but not willing to push pixels. They just want to make a web page look decent. And there's another kind of engineer who really works on the visual and aesthetic and doesn't care a lot of details because in the engineering side, because they're not simply visible in the product. And I think that's a very different set of skills. And I think he was looking for a very visual engineer with an eye for design. I spent a ton of time on my blog and just sharing my learnings. I think that helped make the decision.
So you had that. You had some public representation of your work. That was important, because I know that's very common in the design community. I know Ben is very design centric. I would consider Pinterest a design first company.
Yep.
And so it sounds like your visual representation, your public representation of work was important, because you're right, that is rare for engineers to have.
Yes. I think that made him like pursue me a little bit more, I would say.
Cool. So let's jump into so tonight. Now you joined Pinterest, right? You took the leap. You guys met, and you're there. So my understanding is the early days, y'all were working out of Ben's
apartment. Yeah,
apartment. We'll edit that out. You guys were working out of Ben's apartment at the time. Paint us a picture of those early days, maybe from when you joined up through some of the early days of the you guys moved into the Palo Alto office. Like, what was it like working there in those early days?
It's a lot of fun. Like, I started in Feb 2010. It was pretty much me, Ben, and Paul, and then Dave, who was working on his own startup. So there's 4 of us. We were working out of a small apartment. I know Ben and Paul were very hands-on in like trying to raise money for the product. So every morning I walk in around 8:59. We had a stand-up discussing like, hey, yesterday the investor meetings went this way, and like, I think the product, I got this amount of feedback from our user base, so let's try to hone in on that feedback, fix things. So I would just get a bunch of tasks list and like, hey, I think we need to build XYZ, and they are off to meetings, and then again they come back around 2:30, 3 sometimes, or maybe they come back for lunch, and I'm just like wired in and just trying to build the things. So I used to build fast because again the product was pretty small. So I used to just show again at the end of the day, like, hey, here's what I built, and guess what, I already deployed. So just go try it out and get feedback. And there's like a group of passionate people just giving a ton of feedback. Like, I like this, I don't like the aspect of this. Maybe there should be more design work on this. I don't understand this aspect of the product. So I think they were very passionate users who were just directing and like giving us a lot of feedback. paving the path for, the next roadmap or the sprint on what needs to be done. So it was pretty casual environment. I know they were stressed trying to raise money and pay me, but I was just having a hell lot of fun because there's no one to supervise me and I can use any technology, any product. Any architecture I want to try. I just try things. And then again, over weekend, I'm like, I think that was a mistake. I'm just going to rewrite everything. And I just rewrite it all into simpler things and just learn. It was just a lot of fun.
That's really cool. Was it weird working out of an apartment, or was it just, did it just kind of seem normal because that's kind of where it was, like meaning instead of an office?
I had a whole lot of fun. We all graduated, so I was in pretty good touch with my old classmates and stuff. And while they were working in bigger companies and just they take me to their office for lunch and stuff. So I was missing a certain visual aspect of it, but it didn't bother me. All I knew was I was having fun and I was learning.
You're plugged in too.
Yeah, it was pretty chill. We played tennis in the Friday afternoon, so it was super casual.
That's really cool.
That's awesome. So you said before, I think I've read in another interview that you mentioned that the year 2012 was like a nightmare year. Could you paint us a picture of that time? I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, basically the first year was building the product, getting a ton of feedback. And somewhere in 2011, something happened. It's almost like a switch flipped and there's a ton of traffic. The site was not staying up. I come in at 9 and I want to leave around 5:36, get a bite. But around this time, Marty, who's our second engineer, joined. He has 2-3 kids. So he wants to leave and pick up his kids and have a meal and come back. So it's almost like a tag team where I'm like, all right, I'll take the baton until 9 p.m., but put them to bed and come back to work. So around this time when the site was very unstable, we just had to do a lot of, band-aids where to just keep the service up. And we're like, I promise we're going to rewrite in the next 3 days. And tomorrow a whole set of new problems show up and we're like, oh, damn, now we have that and this and this. And so it was just a mountain full of tasks that we could never accomplish to get to a spot where we want to be. So it's almost like we were playing a game of catch up. There's always a fire. We put out the fire, put a bunch of band-aids, and then let's go fix it tomorrow morning. And tomorrow morning something shows up at the doorstep. And it's always handling the biggest fire at a given situation.
Yeah.
So it was fun, learning a ton. Again, we were hiring a lot of new employees, onboarding them, and playing with the fire. So it was super fun.
And that's just kind of how it goes, right? At an early startup, right? I remember that moment at Pinterest where Silicon Valley discovered what a virtual pinboard was, right? And then things kind of just started to go up and to the right. So every startup kind of wants that, viral moment or that, up and to the right moment. But what you described as kind of chaotic kind of just goes with the territory, right? There's no way to prepare for that or to have it feel less chaotic.
Yeah. I mean, if you're lucky, you would experience it once in your life. And when you ask a lot of questions, I think it's pretty blurry because I think the company was growing at a scale that no single individual, not even, the founders, there was just a lot going on and there was so many things to fix and hire for. And the time is moving much faster at a faster rate than you can go execute something and see the result. Yeah, it's just an amazing time period. Because everywhere we go, oh, we love Pinterest. There was just a ton of love and I could feel all that amazing moments. But at the same time, when you're back to work, you're just holy stuff. There's I think this is an all-nighter. We got to do this. Otherwise tomorrow's traffic. So, I mean, we're in the West Coast. So around 6 p.m., which is 9 p.m. on the East Coast, the traffic just surges massively. We could see people putting their kids to bed and just hopping on to Pinterest to just scroll on that endless feed.
Yeah.
We could see all the traffic and we're oh my God, we're going to go down. Should we just brace ourselves or is there something we can do? Let's just spin up more servers or is that going to hurt us? So it was just more let's try things and see if something works. It was a fun time.
It sounds like you guys had to make a lot of really critical decisions in the moment. I'm curious how y'all were thinking through some of those technical decisions as the traffic is surging and you're not expecting it. How did you guys do that?
I mean, I think 90% of the time it's always your database or an input output that's your issue. So we knew early on we have to shard this beast, like partition our data into multiple smaller machines than have like one gigantic machine, and that machine going under duress or stress is not going to work. So luckily we used to have barbecues at our place in the Friday evenings. So a ton of engineers used to come by because we raised a lot of money, and we were kind of like the hot thing. So we met a lot of interesting engineers from Facebook, Twitter. So a lot of their knowledge and just like, oh yeah, we saw this problem. This is how we tried. But actually in the end, the solution looked something like this. So we had an idea of like what needs to be done, but getting there is like a lot of work. Yeah. So we had like, hey, we have fire to deal with every evening. But the longer picture, this is where we want to go. And it's probably going to take 2-3 months. At least that was my naive estimate of software engineering, but it took like a year to go to that, that beautiful picture that we were painting. And by the time we got there, we were like, okay, that's where we got to be again. Like that's the next bigger mountain. That's where we have to climb. So it was always like a moving target. But luckily we were in a good company a lot of good people. Evan Priestley from Facebook, like they gave like a ton of knowledge in what they learned scaling Facebook, and like we incorporated a lot of their learnings into Pinterest. So it was relatively easier than let's go load test that system and understand if it's going to withstand. It was more like, hey, we know that this system works, but how do we go there from our code base to that? So
I remember some of those days. That was right around the time we signed on to help Pinterest grow. Yeah. Somewhere around that 2012, 2013 timeframe. I remember it was right when Andreessen invested. Well, at that point, it was considered a large sum of funding. No one in Silicon Valley knew what a virtual pinboard was, but it was hot in other parts of the country. And then the recruiting team's job was to go and recruit some of these, top engineers from around the already successful kind of social companies, Twitter, Facebook at the time, Google, et cetera, and then help them kind of see the vision of Pinterest. And so there were a lot of great things that Pinterest had going for it. And so you talked about some of these experienced engineers coming in, joining the team, all kind of working towards turning Pinterest into what it became. Curious, what was the culture like of the engineering team? How did that culture evolve over time? What were like the parts of the culture that seemed to kind of transcend over time?
Yeah. I think that culture initially was more like Ben being the torchbearer for the product. We all trusted his gut. We were just building the product mostly on his guidance and like stuff. But I think as soon as we started bringing engineers from different culture, like, Twitter, Amazon, I think the culture, at least in the engineering org, became more like a data driven. Gut can only take you to a certain spot, but from there, you got to have a much better picture of like what's happening underneath the hood. I think the first set of hires in the data team were like brilliant. We got the sense of I think the why is the biggest answer. Why is someone using Pinterest? And to get that answer is like, it's not easy. So it requires a lot of coordination between the data team and also like people who go talk to our users and understand that signal and how do we incorporate that signal back into the product. I think that was how we moved from like a visionary culture to like a data driven. So we found a harmony between like, let's go run an experiment, although there was a very specific word like instead of experiment, but either way, like go get numbers and then come and present the numbers rather than like, hey, this is what Pinterest should be for the user base. So that's where I saw a very big shift in the culture.
Interesting.
It's simply because we brought these amazing people from different cultures, and like, there's also more like write a single pager before a meeting to address what is this meeting about and what it should stick to, and not just derail into a completely different conversation. So there were very clear, concise points that I can remember that like, the culture, changed its course of direction. And I think it was for the greater good because simply there were too many people, involved in a decision making. And I think if you want to have a sane workflow, you got to have very few cooks in the kitchen and just have people just following certain orders. I think that is one of the biggest cultures you have to develop as a founder in a company.
Yeah. And those first 10 people, right? You must have, bonded well with them through that time. And so as Pinterest grew, right, you guys grew from, from 1 to 10 to 100 to, I don't know, over 1,000, right? So you guys grew quite considerably. If you kind of just picture those 10 people evolving over time, how did those 10 people continue to impact the success and trajectory of the company? What does the future of a first 10 engineer look like for a company that grows to the stage that pitchers grow to?
Yeah, I mean, I think they play a huge role in the entire journey. One thing, I mean, even today, I sometimes have conversations with Ben as he's tinkering a lot of products. One thing I felt like that attributed a huge success is you want your engineers to be very involved in the decision making, yet there's got to be a line where you don't want to bring a whole lot of emotion and I think this is what needs to be built and not XYZ. And I think those are the harder conversations that kind of derail the culture and the company. So I don't know how to put it, but I think an ideal early engineer in a company should be very motivated, yet at the same time not so emotional in decision making, because I guess sometimes an idea your ideas pan out in a group setting and it doesn't. So you have to learn to put emotion out of it and just put the journey and the company first. And I think for an individual to grow into that level, you got to go through a lot of ups and downs and see that culture and feel it and understand what is important. And I think trying to be a founder really helps that mindset.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people go through that founder mentality. So it's tricky and hard for a first engineer to be a really ideal first engineer. You got to trust the journey, trust the people, and just carry the baton forward. Not without putting a lot of thought onto why and help me understand why. And that conversation just blows into a full blown 2 hour, this is how my vision works and this is how my thought process works. So I've seen where just do this becomes a 2 hour conversation between a monologue, a dialogue between two folks and help me understand why we have to build it in a certain way and not this. So I think early engineers and the early team should have a lot more trust. Especially American culture has a lot more dialogue rather than Asian where it's just more hey, do this and absolutely we'll do that and not do anything more. But I think that it's a balance between what's this is the vision, but I am free to carve my own details as long as this is the direction I take. And I think a great ideal early engineer would understand that journey and really gel into the culture of a startup.
Yeah. So now you're a founder yourself through MakersPlace. And I'm curious, are you kind of sticking to some of those same principles or are there things that you're doing just a tiny bit different? And I'm curious, maybe what are those things if you are?
Absolutely. Being an engineering founder, I basically wrote a lot of the core structure and the backbone of the code base. So I've basically established hey, we are a company that wants to ship faster, yet these are some of the things that we care about. So if these three things do not happen, they do not have a unit test case or you haven't put enough time into testing, absolutely push the deadline. So I think I bring my own set of tools, which is being an engineering mindset, hey, this is how I would like to operate. But I always look for a generalist engineer. Mm-hmm. I like to gravitate towards those people in the first set of hires because I like to see myself in them. Probably I don't want a very specific expert who is just I don't want to do that. Yeah. I'm good at this and I only want to do this. So I tend to gravitate towards more generalists who are keen on the vision and you try to get a gauge of can I work with this guy? Is he or she receiving the feedback in a positive way or just it's not really gelling together. So I don't know. Hiring is always a hit or miss. Yeah. Only thing is you can do is hire fast and fire fast. Learn from your mistakes. But
For sure. Thank you.
It's definitely not a perfect science.
Nope.
We haven't figured it out, certainly.
Yeah.
So talk to us about MakersPlace. Why did you start it? What was your vision? What about what you're building excites you?
Yeah. I think the part of the problem we took from Pinterest was there was a lot of amazing content coming into Pinterest and the pinners who are bringing the content, they're getting amassing a lot of followers and people who are consuming they're also getting like, oh, I love seeing more content. Like, I love cinematography. Like, these 3 users are doing a great job. Show me more content. So it's a great ecosystem. Only thing is the creators who are actually putting the time, documenting their journey, be it blog or YouTube videos or like however, I feel like there is no great monetization model for them. And we try to address this at Pinterest, but again, like simply we are just a pipe. So there's really no way to identify who did what. And is this even an official source, or is it like a Reddit link where no one knows what it is and like who owns any rights or who is the creator of something? So when the Bitcoin white paper came out, we were just fascinated. I was personally very fascinated of like, oh, this is an amazing distributed ledger, and like, A can send money to B, and like it's all open and it cannot be tampered with. How about we put a bunch of data in there and say I own this data, and then I can transfer the rights to someone else if I sell it. So I think that idea came from there, and I was just doing more and more research into Bitcoin, and then Ethereum came out. They were able to like, build a smart contract platform around it, and that's when I was like convinced like something has to be done in this realm of like the blockchain to prove like, hey, this artist created XYZ and they sold it to someone else who owns the rights. So I know who to interact with. I know how to get a contract out of it, or you can build simply. I thought 10 years later, how can I go run an ad campaign for my company? I'm going to find a great artist who's creating great content, make a contract with them, and just like have some lawyers draft it. How about I just do it on the blockchain because the data is all out there? So backtracking from that world, like I felt like something has to happen in Ethereum, and we were building towards it. And then the NFT ERC-721 spec came out, and like, whatever we were building was almost like 95% aligned with it. So we married the spec, and like we became an NFT marketplace called MakersPlace, where we were curating the artists. So any artists who onboarded, we were 100% sure that they were legitimate artists. So, and then slowly, people kind of understood it. 2020 and 2021 was a great time. We partnered with Beeple and Christie's and did the largest NFT sale of $69 million.
Wow.
Yeah, by far the largest NFT sale. Things were good. But again, like crypto is going through its ups and downs, and like it's not a great time.
It's going up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are coming back. But I still personally believe that like the blockchain has a much bigger role in the digital collectible world, be it NFTs or something else, but I think it has a role to play.
I think, because we talk to so many people day in, day out, say like here, pitch them on this company, this product, this idea. And people are just very skeptical of certain things. And I think NFTs is one that people generally are like a little risk adverse about. Or what would your pushback be to somebody who is, kind of skeptical about that? Like, what is this? I guess what's the thing that you see that maybe others are missing?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think any initial technology, be it Bitcoin or Ethereum, like people have an innate mentality to like jump on it, try to like make money on it. And then it becomes like a whole blown out scam because like, oh, like someone lost money, someone did something shady. So I think every technology goes through its ups and downs, and NFTs is much, much harder than cryptocurrency because you simply don't know if the artist is legitimate or someone is impersonating someone else. So it is a very hard. So, I mean, I always think about how can I educate people and help them understand the vision of MakersPlace, and it is an extremely hard problem. So I myself wonder, like, what can we do? Someone's got to build and become like the Christies of the NFT world. And that is what our vision is. But it's not an easy journey. There's like people often associate a lot of NFTs with scam. Simply because 99% of NFTs are almost like worthless. But that 1% is like pretty legitimate. But going and finding that 1% that you love, you have to do it for the right reason, which is, oh, I love that artist. I want to collect it. But most people try to like, I want to buy in early and then like come sell later. I think that's the mindset that kind of pushes that innovation to like some other day.
I like that vision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I like that vision, Christie's of NFTs, because, if you're buying something from Christie's, you have a certain association of its quality level, of its verifiable nature, right? There's a certain trust associated with buying product from Christie's. So that associated NFT seems like it could create a lot of value for the space and maybe even directly address those that are skeptical. So are you guys growing? Are you hiring? Is there anyone that, if they happen to be listening, should make a note to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we're always hiring, but like times are a little rough. So, I mean, like if the candidate is right, we would love to hire. But in general, like, we'd love to talk to interesting candidates who are interesting in the space and also like believe in the vision.
And it sounds like the prototype is good, well-rounded generalist engineer, maybe how you describe some of the early days of Pinterest, but applied to the problem space of building the Christies for NFTs.
Yes, I think we've summed it very well. Yeah,
cool. Well, if you're listening, engineer, reach out to Yash.
Yeah, it's just Yash at MakersPlace, so at .com. So
cool. Anything that we didn't ask you that you wish we had, or that you feel could be a good thing to share with the world?
No, I think it's pretty well rounded. Like, I feel like I covered the story. I feel like you've touched MakersPlace too, which is nice. So yeah, I don't know. I'm all open. Like, I mean, it's been a while, like, since I've jogged this memory.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of these, like, sharing the story in like 2017, 16 a lot. And then it's like almost a 5-year pause. And now I'm like, oh yeah, that happened.
I forgot about all that.
Yeah.
Maybe while we have you, and then while it's fresh, right? Because a lot of our listeners are founders that are building early teams, but a lot of our listeners are also engineers that are contemplating, idea of joining something early stage, like kind of back to where you were after Symantec, or maybe even while at Symantec and considering something early stage, right? What advice would you give to someone today who's considering joining an early stage startup?
Oh boy. I don't know. People often overthink a simple decision. Like, there's so many factors like, oh, is this company going to be the next Facebook? Or like, people just overthink a lot. Like, you're doing a job and you need certain amount of money to have a good life. So draw the line at that, like, okay, I need absolute this, and if anything about that is greater, and just optimize for like, do I believe in this vision? Do I like these people that I'm sitting around? And just base that decision on these two things. But instead, like, people try to talk to friends who are just like, oh, I'm just making a killing at XYZ because of this decision. And then you just look back and like start to question like, well, why am I even like being an engineer right now? Should I just become a PM? So I think it's just, we complicate by communicating too much. I think it's just, you just have to sit and like think like, is this the right thing for you? And just hear the voice deep inside and like trust it. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to say to not overthink, but again, like I just obsess over a lot of smaller things too that doesn't matter. But I guess, you gotta tweak those dials to the right amount to feel good about your journey and then execute it.
I like that so much. So the message is don't overthink it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to go back and just sit with my colleagues at Pinterest and just work again. We always have a group chat like, what can we do to work together? But like, again, it's just like, it just shows that love. Like, hey, I like sitting beside you and just not thinking about a lot of things and just working on one thing at a time. And I would love to do that again.
I mean, it sounds like it was a special time. We know that it was, having kind of been along for the ride. So glad you were a part of it as well. I'm glad we got the chance to connect here. And thank you for sharing your stories, your perspectives, your reflections, and a little bit about what you're up to now. It'll be exciting to see how this continues to grow, especially with crypto seeming to rebound a little bit and there being some renewed enthusiasm.
Thank you.
So thanks again, Yash.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you joined. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.